Hello, I'm David Foster in Paris, where it said the Olympics could bring France 12 billion euros. How is that possible? When for some countries it's been virtually ruinous to be a host, some cities almost going bankrupt. So what does it take to make a Games a success? What mistakes have to be avoided? We've assembled a team of experts to talk about Paris 2024. Welcome to Beyond Borders. Well, we've moved just a few hundred metres to a Parisian rooftop and we'll get talking in just a moment. But first, a man who won 5 consecutive golds at 5 consecutive Olympics, Sir Steve Redgrave. And if he doesn't know what makes a Games work, then nobody does.
If you're an athlete, media or a spectator, your interaction is with those volunteers, of guiding you through the airports, guiding you to venues, guiding you through the whole process. London got that right and was very special.
Let me introduce everybody who's here. We have 2 volunteers, we have an Olympic silver medalist, we have a journalist from Paris who hates the idea of the Olympic Games. But we're talking about volunteerism here, and I'm going to begin with you, Heather Fell. Silver medalist in Beijing, how much did you rely on the volunteers?
As an athlete, you are so focused on your role, what you're doing. But it's actually previous Games that I've been to since, and London, I ended up working there and being amongst it. And the atmosphere that the volunteers brought was just incredible. There's always someone there. If you needed to find something, where is the bathroom, where is this? And there would be about 3 people wanting to take you somewhere. And it was just what made the Games.
I want to talk to Alexandra first on this. Your motives for doing it and what you think you can bring.
Well, my motive is obvious. It's once-in-a-lifetime event, so it's now or never. Just to be a part of that and help make this possible and to achieve it, it's just such a motivation for me. It was obvious I had to be there.
I think it was an opportunity as a person who actually in sport and who also like to give time for other people. This is wonderful.
Anne-Elisabeth Moutet, you're a Parisian. You're going to be here for the Games. Do you resent what's happening here?
I mean, you said I hate the idea of the Olympics. I mean, I like the Olympics actually, but I think we took on too much. And when I say we, I say France. The idea that there's going to be a massive ceremony, opening ceremony with a flotilla going down the Seine, which sounds absolutely marvelous, but which is a security nightmare. That some events are going to be in the Seine, and to this day we still do not know whether people can actually swim in the Seine. I remember.
Since you bring that up, this
Yes.
is our own water test. Pass it to you, Heather. They're faint, one of the lines, but 2 lines means it's contaminated water. We took that this morning. Difficult to see, but
definitely
believe
2
me,
lines.
Believe me,
Definitely 2 lines. It seems to me that it's going to be a bit nightmarish. We have the powers that be, the president of the Paris region, Valérie Pécresse, who said, well, Parisians will have to learn that it's good to walk when you want to go and take the metro, which is fine as long as you decide it for yourself. It so happens that I will be in Paris at the time of the Games. I have a plane to take the day before the end of the Games. I have no idea how I'm going to get to the airport because the Stade de France is on the way to the airport, and I live in a red zone for which I have to obtain a QR code to be allowed to go home because of security.
Have you been taught how to deal with security issues?
On the volunteer part, we had some online learning formation session that told us a lot of stuff about how to deal with tourists, how to deal with when you have conflicts and fighting. But except from that part, we weren't taught anything specific about security in Paris.
When you were in Beijing, were you taught about security? Were you given briefings?
Because that's the job of your national federation, your team. They are doing all of that, and there's so much going on behind the scenes. As an athlete, if your team are doing the right job, you won't know, because your job is there to purely perform. And yes, it might take a little bit longer to get to the venue and to get through, but because of all the amazing volunteers, that's normally quite smooth.
Alexandra and France, let me ask you this. Have you been given enough training so far? We are only, 6-7 weeks before the Games as we record this programme. Have you been given any proper training?
From my point of view, I would say no, because it was only online session, and I feel like they still haven't given us more, and we didn't have, I feel,
So you're a little
proper
concerned.
Yeah, I think we can say that.
Yeah, France, you're nodding in
Yeah,
agreement.
no, but I agree. I'm a little bit excited, and I wish to know more. We have to know more information, because I don't know about, I have my schedule, my time, but not really further.
Difficult with 45,000 volunteers.
Yeah, we 45,000.
But if you could give these two volunteers, and perhaps you could pass it on to others as well, an idea of what they should do and shouldn't do.
You should smile a lot. I mean, it is for me, and I think London was the prime example, was the energy that the volunteers brought. I'm sure you will get that training. It'll be in your schedule.
We mentioned earlier the water test we did in the Seine and how it's contaminated, E. coli in it. I should point out that you've switched from modern pentathlon to becoming a triathlete, which involves swimming in open water.
As an amateur, but I am obviously
Would
working.
you swim in that river?
If I'd been selected to represent my country to compete in triathlon, I would swim in that river.
But you wouldn't want to.
I would not want
feel
to.
like you had to.
I would not want to. If it's your once in your lifetime opportunity to compete at an Olympic Games, you as an athlete have to trust your team, have to trust the organisers. You don't have a choice. That is the black and white of it. You can say, yes, I'm not going to compete, but you're missing out on an Olympic Games.
You two volunteers, as we come towards the end of this section, I want to ask you how much you're looking forward to it.
Very much if all goes according to plan.
I am sure it's going to be spectacular. Like I said, we volunteer, we have the art of the game, so it'll be a marvelous journey.
Thanks very much indeed. Time for Steve Redgrave again, possibly the greatest Olympian of all time. 5 gold medals of 5 consecutive Olympics, and he was part of the bid for London 2012. He says there is a price to be paid.
When you've got 7 years from being awarded the Games to delivering, there is a lot of infrastructure that has to be improved. That's roads, that's buildings, that's all sorts of different things. And obviously the price is there, is that there's a lot of construction work going on during that period of time. Delay in traffic, delay in getting around. But if you look at London, especially the sort of the East End, that was very much needed investment. And what the Games are able to do is to speed that process up. That has to be done at some point.
So a little bit of inconvenience, or perhaps a bit more than that. Let's talk to Vladimir Andreev, who's an honorary professor at the Sorbonne, a sports economist and who advises the French sports ministry. Tell me about the major problems that there are in organising the Olympic Games.
Oh, there are many, but the major issue is more basically cost overruns. Because we observe that since Montreal 1976, every Olympiad is finishing up with a cost overrun. It means that in the candidature file you have a number for the cost, and you come back 7 years after with the opening ceremony, and then you find twice bigger the cost. 100% increase, except in Beijing 2008, where the increase was 12 times more than the initial cost.
And how does that map out for France, Paris 2024?
The cost officially in the candidature file was put as 6.7 billion euros. Okay, at the last auditing report assessed last December the cost to be 8.8 billion. So it's a 30% increase. Probably the cost will end up between 9 and 10, which is a good performance. The only city which has not run over the cost is Los Angeles 1984.
Los Angeles 1984, I think, was because they already had the facilities there from Games many
It's a part of the
years
it's
earlier.
a part of the truth. But the other part of the truth is that Los Angeles was the unique candidate in 1977. So the games were not awarded through an auction process.
So they didn't have to make promises.
No, exactly. And when you have an auction process, then each city, candidate city, has to overbid the others. And so they are competing. They underestimate the cost in the candidature file. For instance, in London 2012, they don't calculated all the VAT cost.
Is this on purpose then? They're under.
Yeah, it was on
underselling?
purpose.
Right.
They did not include all the VAT tax, okay? They did not include all the cost of the Paralympics, even though it is compulsory to host the Paralympics as well.
So why are they doing this?
It's a very good question. So they underestimate the cost and they overestimate the benefits.
Yeah.
So for Paris, they will say, okay, we'll organize a wonderful, a fantabulous opening ceremony on the Seine River, you know. And now they are stuck with that, okay? But in the candidature file, it was a way to win against Budapest or Los Angeles for 2024.
Are you interested as an ex-athlete or just as a human being who can't perhaps believe the price of you have to pay for an Olympics?
As an Olympian, it's the legacy of the Olympics and what the future looks like for the Olympics, because I think we're all becoming more aware of the importance of sustainability and the impact of an Olympic Games. But sustainability isn't purely about the environmental or purely about the economy. It's about what it does for people and what hope it can bring to people and how it can inspire.
Just to go further in your way, you have also an economic impact, which is usually positive. It is expected to be between 7 and 11 billion euros for Paris 2024. But you may also have some intangible benefits for the athletes, for sure. But look, for London 2012, there was a joint study achieved by the London School of Economics and the Paris School of Economics. They made an inquiry in London during the Games, and at the same time with a comparable sample, the same inquiry in Berlin and Paris, which did not get the game. They discovered that Londonians were happy, much more happy than those living in Paris or in Berlin in the year 2012. So people were happy. They felt good. Okay, they were
like
happy.
that.
So
Yeah.
it's a result. By the end of December 2012, it was over. They have paid 12 billion for 1 year happiness.
What would you say the biggest mistakes that are made, either in bidding for the
You
Games?
mean in London or in Paris?
Well, wherever.
For me, as an economist, the wrong thing is the promise. And the promise is due to this overbidding system. For the future, if you are talking about Los Angeles 2012, 2028, and Brisbane 2032, my expectation is no cost overrun. Wow. Because there was no bidding.
Let me ask you, Heather, I mean, this is going to be the 6th Olympics that you've been at. Do you notice a difference in terms of attitude, arrogance, hubris, if you like, where you promise too much and then you fall, between the host cities that you've been to?
Do you know, I think the resounding resemblance is the fact that they all, as you get closer to the Games, things are not going to be finished. That's always the talk, that we're running out of time, and the media love that. And every Games I've been to, we've been to a test event the year before, there's always a test event then, and you're hardly competing in the same venue. The idea of a test event is that you test it all out and it's not really there and ready. But every year that happens, and every year it is in on time. It's like someone who doesn't get their homework done, but they get it in at the nick of time. And I feel like every Olympics might have a different story and a different problem to overcome, but somehow it always delivers. You're going out to Beijing the year before and seeing this construction of a bird's nest still looking like a shell, and then coming back
Just
a year
like a few
later.
twigs on the ground.
Yeah.
An early
Something like
bird's
that,
nest.
Yeah, and then coming back a year later and it's all, all fine. I mean, they might have had to hide a few things behind some barriers, but it feels like every Olympics has similar problems, yet they all get there somehow in the nick of time.
So, Vladimir, how is that possible? Is it because more money has to be spent?
No.
Suddenly you have to have the hurry up.
Because in the background of She Said, there is a contract which is signed between the host city and the IOC. So in 2017, Paris signed a contract with the IOC. And what is written in this contract is that if there is some profit, a monetary profit from the Games, it will be shared between the IOC, the National Olympic Committee of France, and the French government or the French state. But if there is a deficit, it will be charged only on France. Okay? So definitely it is always in time, even if you have to rush.
What changes need to be made to the system?
My own suggestion to the IOC, which was immediately rejected, is the IOC decides by itself which city in the world will host the next games.
What would you change, having seen so many?
I want to see the games becoming more sustainable environmentally, but also just generally for the economy and for the people. But I don't know what the answer is. I would throw that to the economists and the environmentalists.
Thank you both very, very much indeed. We're going to talk next about an Olympic legacy. What does it take to make one? What is one, in fact? And here are the thoughts of Sir Steve Redgrave.
I remember going to Ken Livingstone, trying to convince Ken to come on to be part of the bid, because obviously the mayor of the city is very, very important. And I sat in front of him in his office, and he said, "You're expecting me to say I'm not really interested in sport, but I see what the Olympics did for Barcelona, for a port town that had been run down. The Olympics really generated the whole of the city, and now is still a romantic destination to go." And Ken said, "I saw what happened to Barcelona, and I can see what can happen from London from being part of the Games." And that's where he came straight on board and was really very, very supportive of the whole process.
So the point is, if you get the right people on side, you may win the games. You've then got to host them, and then you're looking at what happens afterwards. With us still, Vladimir Andreev and Anne-Elisabeth Moutet. Let me ask you, you look at the money side of things.
Yes, of course.
Vladimir, what is a legacy?
You can measure the legacy only after some years. You cannot measure it overnight at the end of the ceremony, So if you take time, you can see a number of benefits and a number of costs in the long run. And then if you compare, you will have a difference, which is called in economics the net social benefit of the games. And if you calculate it, let's say 5 years after, it's a kind of legacy in which you will have tangible things and intangible things. So tangible things are stadium or swimming pools or new buildings, or you may have more people practicing sport. And it was true for at least 4 or 5 years after the London Games. It's a kind of intangible benefit.
Let's bring in Philip Barker, Olympic historian, man who's worked as a journalist at many games as well, coming here to Paris for 2024. We've got Vladimir there talking about London 2012. You think that was the gold standard?
Yes, it was one of the great Olympics. You look at Barcelona, you look at Sydney, and you look at London as the recent games which have really hit the mark and that people remember fondly. And what Vladimir said about the intangible legacy is very important as well, because with London, it was a few things. You had the feel-good factor that everybody was happy, that people were taking part in sport. And it also was a chance for women to be given their platform. We saw a lot of women winning gold medals for Great Britain. And all of a sudden, over the next few years, women's sport began to be reported and given a due prominence in the media. People were talking about it and people were treating it seriously, which probably hadn't happened in the years before that.
Looking back at Olympics that haven't been quite so celebrated, Philip, and you've been to a few, what would you say the big mistakes are when it comes to trying to cement your legacy?
Well, the big mistakes are being too grandiose. You look at Athens and they built a lot of permanent facilities that ultimately weren't used, although I was in Athens a few weeks ago for the lighting of the torch, and you walk around the Olympic Park and I was delighted to find that the swimming pool was in use for water polo and swimming. On a Saturday afternoon there were plenty of people using the facilities, but you go back even further. I remember watching on television the Montreal Olympics when the Queen declared open the Games in an unfinished stadium. They had this huge tower which had been considered as the signature statement, and it just wasn't finished in time for the Games. It wasn't finished, in fact, for another decade. So the legacy has got to be done in a timely manner as well, so that the people who experience the Olympics can also experience the benefits that have accrued from it.
Anne-Elisabeth, what do you think the legacy of France, I beg your pardon, of Paris 2024 will be?
what could be bad for Paris, and I do not know whether it's going to happen or not, is if people are disappointed. And there are many reasons why they could be disappointed. If the grandiose opening does not work out or does not happen after having flagged, it's the
This
flotilla.
is the barge procession
Yes.
down the Seine, big security problems, athletes,
It was supposed to
massive
be
crowd.
open to 1 million people and free, and it's now going to be 350,000 people and paying tickets, except for people in the back who will not see
So
much.
if that's not a success, how would you define it not being a success first?
Well, either there's a security problem, or it doesn't happen because they are worried. There's the fact that the city of Paris itself is in bad shape. The roads are not upkept. The city is dirty. Right now we've got a strike of the dustmen because they want more money. But there are so many things in Paris that are not finished that no resident believes that the 7,300 different roadworks and work areas of Paris being worked on will be finished at the time.
Let me add a but here.
Yes.
Yeah, they will be finished at some point in time. The extra metro lines will be finished, the roadworks will be finished, the sewage will be finished. Everything will be a lot better than it was before.
I have doubts about the
Eventually.
sewage, but the metro lines, the metro lines will happen.
Eventually. And the point that both Vladimir and Philip have made is that it takes time to cement a legacy.
I agree, but I also think that the metro lines were planned anyway. They were planned long before we got the victory to get the games in 24, 1 century after the 1924 Olympics.
Aren't some people always looking for the worst thing to happen? We call them Cassandras.
Yeah, no, I don't think so. But some people are looking to take their share in the event. And Elizabeth was referring to strikes. What is a strike? It's a way for a union to get its share in the cake. There is always an inflationary Olympic cycle. 1 year before the games, there is an inflation, which is due to what? To the fact that people who are able to move their price up do that to get a share in the windfall profit, which is falling from the IOC or from elsewhere.
Philip, are there too many people saying the Olympics are a bad thing, both financially, both in terms of in the environment, etc., when in fact it is a force for good? It brings people together, it brings families together, it brings athletes together, we see wonderful performance. Is there a plus side that is disregarded?
Yeah, there were Cassandras, as you call them, before the Sydney 2000 games, which are considered amongst the greatest ever. And there was a lot of negativity. And then the torch relay started and people then started to have their tickets arrive. They started to get into the spirit of the games. And that was the same with London. But when it gets to the games, you have this sort of feel-good thing once the games start. The important thing is that the opening ceremony does go well, because that's often described as the first gold medal of the games, the opening ceremony. If that goes well, gets everything off to a flying start, then that gives the whole thing a little bit of impetus.
Which does make me wonder, and we'll bring it back here in a second, but Philip, you finish this sentence off. Why on earth did they pick such a difficult opening ceremony when it is the one thing you want to go well at the very start?
Well, they wanted to do something different. Tony Estanguet uses this phrase, games wide open. He wants the games to be open to everybody. It's commendable, but it does set you up for a fall.
And Elizabeth, how are we going to know that it hasn't worked?
The likelihood is higher than in other places because it's so ambitious and it's so in so many locations and at a time when France is not in such a good shape. But it might work out, because it is perfectly true that if the ceremony, actually the opening ceremony, goes well, then it's going to be so buoyant for the rest of the games that if something goes wrong, it will just be it will just be an incident. The we'll show the rest of the world attitude is probably more risky than somebody who says, right, we're going to do this in one specific area and not move it too much.
And Elizabeth, thank you very much indeed. We've been talking legacy. Philip Barker in London. Also, thank you very much to Vladimir here. We're going to hear now from the one person who knows what she wants most of all out of the Paris 2024 Olympics, the woman in charge of the legacy.
For Paris Paris 2024 legacy is of course tangible legacy with a new swimming pool and a new village which will be a new quarter, but it's overall an intangible legacy. It's a social impact for the population and the community here in France to provide programs to move more at school, in the city, and to also use the games to develop Seine-Saint-Denis where we are here, which is the poorest place in France, but also the youngest department in France. So we really have to have a positive social impact here.
So, the Olympic legacy, what's left behind for future generations, an impossible thing to define, but apparently absolutely vital. Thanks for watching this special edition of Beyond Borders. Let the Games begin.